Hello, and welcome to the Green Team of the Legendarium, the weird little spinoff of the Legendarium podcast where patrons get together to talk about the books and topics the main crew hasn't gotten around to yet. I'm Little Red Book. And tonight with me, I have the man who has reviewed Greatcoats twice, Cesky.
Hey.
And I have the man who had to endure an automobile accident with me, Soulution.
Hey, everybody.
And I have a very special guest with us tonight. It's Sebastien de Castell.
Hi, everyone.
So, Cesky, we have divided our questions by color, and you are the orangey yellow color.
Yep. Well,
that's why she was saying it. Right.
Sorry. Well, first off, Sebastien, I just wanted to say I've read all the Greatcoats. I've read the first one 2 or 3 times. I absolutely love the first book, and I really love the fourth book, and I've also read the entire Spellslinger series, and I thought that was also just so nice, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest in the Malevolent 7 as soon as I get some time.
Thank you.
So
yeah, that's good to hear.
I really enjoyed them, but I wanted to talk a little bit about your fencing and fight choreography, because in the books, when how do you say his name? Do you say Falcio or?
Yeah, Falcio.
Falcio. So when Falcio is fighting, he's always describing his fencing, and it flowed so well. So did you have I saw you had a background in it a little bit, but can you just explain how you kind of figured out how you wanted to write it that way?
Yeah. So I mean, so many fantasy authors have backgrounds with fencing that I almost feel bad like when I get introduced that way on a panel, because I'm almost positive there's like 2 or 3 people around me who, have recently come from some historical European martial arts, tournament or something. I've barely picked up a sword in the last, 20 years. But I think, there's 2 different parts to it. So, fight choreography was a great experience. First of all, it's an incredibly fun job. And it was a great experience for understanding that action has to tell its own story, and it almost like tells a micro story. And that's something that comes up when Falcio's in a fight. You can almost extract that sword fight or that duel, and it's almost a little story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has a twist in it, and it has a kind of a theme to it, and these kind of things. And that's something that you really learn when you're filling in the blanks in a live Shakespeare play where it says they fight. Like in a Shakespeare play, you have all the fabulous, dialogue and stuff, and then all of a sudden it just says they fight, and that's the part you're filling in. And since you can't fill it with words all the time, sometimes there'll be dialogue. You're able to stage dialogue inside of the fight, but sometimes you're not, and you have to figure out how are you going to tell a story with that. So in the context of a book, especially the Greatcoats books, I happen to be lucky that I was writing Falcio as both main character and narrator, because the way that Falcio kind of thinks about life in general, the way he tends to describe things in general, sits very nicely with a sword fight, because he's always kind of obsessing with what makes this situation different from the ones he's faced in the past. And so he's always telling us how he would sort of how he's kind of solving that problem, or when he's losing, not solving that problem. And that a little bit comes from fencing. Fencing is not at all like dueling, in the sense that you're not usually trying to kill each other. But also because there's these breaks, right? There's actual breaks in the fight. And we have good reason to believe that certainly in some historical sword duels, just in fighting in general, in war in general, people do separate for a moment because they're not sure, whether to jump back in or not, or whether they need a breath, or whether to find their footing. And certainly in fencing, that is the moment, after a point where you're trying to kind of wrestle with what just happened, and how am I going to win this fight? Because this opponent is faster than I am, or they've got better technique than I do, and that's where you're sort of looking for that. So all of that kind of plays into Falcio, which is why, he tends to kind of describe it a lot. And the way that I tend to write fight scenes, or even magic scenes, or any kind of scene where there's action, is I've always believed that the best way to do it for the reader is to first show them how things work just a little bit. tell them what the sword strokes look like, what the thrusts look like give them just enough detail that they can really, really visualize it. Because then you don't actually have to choreograph the beats of the fight. The reader will choreograph it themselves. You can get back into feelings and dialogue and story and all of that stuff. And the reader's just kind of filling it all in themselves. So that's possibly a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how I bring fencing and fight choreography into my writing.
No, I love that. That sounds really nice, and I can see it when I kind of remember some of those scenes where it almost tells its own story just right then in that fight. It is a story, right? Like you said, there's the twist, the climax, the resolution, and then we move on. But so I like that. I don't think I've seen that too often in other books. So.
And I really enjoyed like the Greatcoats having actual conversations during their fencing. Is it Elena, the little girl? She's like, Elena, did they just have a conversation? I really enjoyed that one particular scene specifically.
Oh yeah, no, the sword language. Yeah, at one point when I was writing Trader's Blade is kind of it's my debut novel, and it's kind of a funny example of when a novelist just goes, I'm just going to throw every possible cool idea that I've had in my entire life to this moment in there, and so I had to constantly find different ways to make sure that everything felt different, so it just didn't feel like a whole bunch of sword fights or duels, or action scenes, in fact. And so one of those was, it occurred to me that because the Greatcoats, as an order of traveling magistrates, who have to sometimes duel to enforce their verdicts, would spend so much time together studying and practicing together to sort of stay in fighting form, that they would eventually start to kind of, convey things with different sword movements. And so eventually I sort of, in my mind, turned that into that they would almost have this whole other language, in the way that, like sometimes thieves, even historically, have had, sign languages that they would use. And if you look back, there's that rich tradition of I don't know if it's an inappropriate term now, but they used to call them hobo marks or things like that, where people who are traveling, like they would put all these specific signs on front gates. They would write them in chalk so that the next person who came would know whether there was like an angry dog or whether this was a good place to ask for a meal during the Depression. And so, I like the idea of having that little bit of a language there. And actually, there's a book that's going to come out in, I guess, 2 years from now, about two new Greatcoats that people haven't seen before, and I brought back the sword language except this time you actually know what's happening when it's happening, so you get.
Okay, we're
clued into watching Cesky rubbing his hands together so gleefully.
I'm so excited. That brings such joy to my heart.
Okay, so do you ever analyze books or movies based on the swordplay?
Not really. I used to. So when I was doing sword choreography for theater, and I was never very big in this space, I should point out, but I did have some really wonderful opportunities, and I had a really good time doing it. I would watch every sort of sword fight I could, because you're always just looking for new ideas and what works. I am always very conscious of it, but it's more a downside. It's like martial artists when they watch fight scenes, where they're so often disappointed by something that if they just happen to have not been martial artists, they wouldn't have noticed, so they would have been fine with. I do tend to think that actually everybody experiences it to a certain extent. I remember I was doing a movie once, briefly. It was some short film or something with a friend of mine who's a very, very good kind of wushu choreographer. But it had swords in it, and he would always kind of dismiss the swordplay stuff, and he'd say, nobody knows what any of these moves are. Like, nobody knows what's realistic or not. And I would say, they don't know, they can't tell you what's wrong with it. They just know that it feels weird. Like, they'll just know that it feels kind of weird because they have bodies, they've held sticks, they know that, like, somehow this one actor has been standing there for an awfully long time to give the other person time to spin around and whack them with a sword. There's very few actual turns in swordplay. There are some. They're not impossible, but you see a lot of that spinning around. So more often what happens is I'll be watching something. I think recently it's happened with like Rings of Power, and not to knock that. I think it's been knocked plenty. But I was watching sort of a fight scene, and I just thought, I just didn't understand why anybody would sort of cheat themselves with the opportunity to have some emotion in there. There's a tendency I see quite often, and actually I see this in fantasy novels as well, sometimes to use a character's skill at fighting as as its own kind of like spectacle or excitement, right? Where you sort of like, oh, look how cool that character is. They're just kicking the hell out of everybody. They're so tough, and all these big thugs are such idiots. And when I see that in a movie, I'm like, wow, there's just no stakes happening there. I always think it's the worst mistake. One of the best things, if you recall, like watching the old Indiana Jones movies, was Indiana Jones getting punched in the face all the time. You were like, that guy really had to struggle to win a fight. Like, not because he was bad at it, but because he was fighting people that were sometimes better. And one of the things I always did with Falco is I was like, I don't want to show how amazing he is. I want to show that he's always at risk. And so, yeah, when I'm watching movies or reading novels now, I'm always looking for the same thing I think we all are, which is I just want story, I want emotion, I want drama, I want stakes, I want to feel that the character is in jeopardy. And if I don't feel that, either because they're overpowered in the story or because the filmic version of it is just over the top, then yeah, it just sort of pulls me out.
Oh, that's very fair. While we're still on that, I did want to ask one last follow-up question is, do you wish more authors took up trades that they wrote about, as far as like, the wushu and everything like that?
Not really. I think as a reader, as an author, I wish they would all get.
Yes, just you, right? That's it. So we all get the books.
If Brandon Sanderson is in a mood to become an MMA cage fighter, that would be excellent because, he'll be a little bit too busy to write the books that
I don't know.
I feel
like his
very mild little way to compete with in the marketplace. But as a reader, I will tell you that most of the time these days, and partly just by the nature of what I read, what I often wish is just authors that actually authors, and because I know how publishing works, that publishers and editors cared more about prose. We kind of live in an era where everybody seems to think that the language, that the writing itself is somehow irrelevant. It's not about the flowery words. It's not about it's about characters and story. And I'm like, there's no such thing. There are no characters. There's only words. All you have to create the character from are words, and really great words, really well chosen with a really great cadence and all that. Like, that just gets me super excited. And when I can, when I pick up a book, like almost instantly, that's what kind of grabs me. If the writing is just really great, and if it's not, it doesn't matter how much it's in tune with what I like as a in terms of what kinds of characters or things like that. I just like so I tend to like really good prose. So I sort of wish, I wish we were that's what I struggle with, or that's what I work on a lot of the time. I ask myself all the time, could this sentence be better? Is there just a better word? Is there a better timing?
Okay.
Sometimes I'm asked like who my favorite writers are, and I often will tell people like Aaron Sorkin, who wrote The West Wing, who writes this incredible dialogue, who can make a scene about a secretary being yelled at or handed a memo to deliver into drama and make it rich, and a lot of it's through the language. So yeah,
very interesting, cool.
But again, if Brandon's listening and he wants to quit,
I think we would all go. I'd go watch a match, at least one. We'll see how it goes.
Oh man, just that image is hilarious. Poor Brandon.
Well, he's going to be dressed up like Nacho Libre, right? That's the first thing I thought of. Yeah.
He always strikes me. I met him once. He's incredibly nice in person, and all I've ever heard is how nice he is. He always strikes me as the kind of person who could pretty much do anything really, really well, because he would just set his mind to it. He'd figure out how to do it the right way, and he seems to have that sort of dogged persistence and work ethic. So, yeah, but if I could just get him off writing books, then there'd be more room for the rest of us.
I'm not sure what you'd have to do to get him to do that. That might be more of those blood packs, but so you talked a little bit about watching shows and seeing the choreography, but when you're reading books, are you able to kind of turn off that analytical part of just kind of enjoy it, or is it more just kind of always there for you when you're reading it and kind of critiquing it or not?
It's almost always there. When it shuts off, which is once every few years, I will have discovered that I've stayed up all night reading reading a book or something like that. But most of the time, yeah, I've not been very good at turning off the analytical part of me. It drives my wife crazy because we'll sit and watch a TV show together, and there's such a predictability around the notion of Chekhov's gun, for example. The old adage that if you show a rifle on the mantle in the first act, it has to be shot. It has to be fired before the third act. And so I'll just constantly be like making lists of like, oh, they did an insert shot on that statuette that is otherwise not important. I'm gonna get hit in the head with that thing.
Maltese Falcon.
Sometimes it is so fun to just like nitpick things that you're watching or reading, though. Just go through and be like, that's like, just like you're saying, okay, I saw the statue there that doesn't have anything to do with it. Like, where's that coming back? And then the next, so I totally get that. That's kind of fun sometimes.
Yeah, when I was, it's funny. Malevolent Seven has a weird. The narrator talks to the reader more often than in even in the Greatcoats, and there's a jackal that's part of the seven. That's just a jackal, and he's constantly warning the reader, like, if you're waiting for this jackal to turn out to be like a superhuman magician or something that's going to save the day, he's not. So I was trying to like sort of go like, if you're following the Chekhov's gun, you're out
I
of luck.
actually really enjoyed this. I'm about halfway through it, and I actually really enjoyed the jackal quite a lot, as well as the main narrator's voice, Cade's voice. He's really fun and funny. So.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, voices is kind of the huge thing. I struggle a lot with writing process, where there's some writers seem like they have these very, very effective processes that they just follow beginning to end, and every single book I've written has sort of had a different process. The one thing I'm starting to discover is that if I really have a character's voice, then I'll almost never get stuck. There's something about there's something about voice in the context of literature, like in the context of writing a novel, where it's almost inextricably linked with what a character would do. In other words, when you have their voice, you know what they'll do next. And that's something I found. And Cade was great for that. Cade Umbra, who's the main character in Malevolent Seven. I just found his voice like right off the first page, right off the first line. That first line is pretty much the first line that I wrote. And I was just like, okay, I get where he's
Well, that first page was great. That I started yesterday because I was like, all right, I need to get at least somewhat into this. And the whole first page just had me laughing because it felt like the Greatcoats, and not like the setting, but just how you have friendships and your humor is just incredible. I like that. That's probably my favorite part of your writing.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that particular style of opening, I think I'm going to try to patent it one day, because I really think it's like the easiest way to open a fantasy novel. Because the struggle with fantasy novels universally is, how do you tell the reader about the world that they're walking into? Because if you just start with the kind of the thing I see all too often, Kilchandra dropped to the rooftops, her knife in her hand, and crawled stealthily along people do that kind of thing all the time. And it's annoying a little bit because it's sort of cliche. It doesn't feel like it's got any feeling behind it, but also because you have no real way of centering around like what matters here. Like, where are we and what really matters? And of course, you don't want to sit there and go, all right, reader, we're in a faux 16th century world, except that, Europeanist world, except this and this and this are different. But with the particular opening of going, picture a wizard, go ahead, close your eyes, and then sort of describing the classical one, and then going, okay, now open your eyes and I'll show you what a real wizard looks like. It makes it really easy to bring the audience into like the frame of that story.
Yeah, I feel like you include us sometimes. You're inviting us that opportunity to really get in our heads, which is what you said, the voices, which is so important, and you make a good job of making that distinct.
Yeah, I remember when Trader's Blade got bought, and that was my debut novel. It was also only the second novel I'd ever written in my life. The first one was a terrible, terrible mystery novel that I wrote by following a set of cassette tapes called "Let's Write a Mystery." Um, and I remember when my agent asked if I had any other books when she signed me, and I said I just have this horrible mystery. It's like completely amateurish, called Skeletons in the Cloister. And she said, "Oh, I can sell that." And I said, "Well, no, it's a terrible book." And she said, "Yeah, but it's great."
Like that's all we need. Yeah.
It
That
is
was
a
my
good title.
introduction to how publishing works. But when Trader's Blade got bought, I remember I spoke to both my editor, the inimitable Joe Fletcher, who's kind of one of the kind of legends of fantasy publishing. I had met her, and on the same day I was meeting Adrienne Kerr, who was the senior acquiring editor at Penguin. So Penguin had bought the Canadian rights, and Joe Fletcher Books, like part of Quirkus, which is now part of Hachette, had bought the world rights. And I'd asked them both, "Why did you pick this book?" And they both said it was the voice. They just said, I just really liked the voice right away." And so that taught me something very early on, which is that, yeah, that voice is as important as any other aspect. When we think of plot or character or things like that, voice is really crucial. And actually, when you're trying to distinguish yourself as an author, when you're trying to sell your first book, the more voicey, the more sense of voice there is about your book, that's one of the few things you can really compete on. Because when you're writing, if you're writing fantasy novels, you can't just go, "My book has more swords than everyone else's books." you know and people will try to sort of make the most unique, most original thing imaginable, but then the more you do that, the less it sounds like the things people want to read some of the time, and so it gets kind of confusing. But yeah, just finding your voice as an author is both a really pleasing artistic experience, but also a really effective business strategy.
All right. So, sorry, I had one last one about the friendships, and it's a little bit different. So, we really like how you have the friendships between like Falchio and Brasti and Cast and all them, and you seem to do that when I'm getting them 11 to 7. You bring that along in a different format, but do you have any like friendships that really like is based off of this? What can you describe the friendships in your life, I guess, is my question for that.
That's funny. I've always just kind of been drawn to that, and so it manifests as friendships in the books, but where it actually comes from is from being in bands, music. Like when I was like, I think I was 19, I was in my first band. I think our band knew, like, I think I knew 4 chords at the time. When we had our first gig, and we were playing like a cowboy bar in the interior, and yeah, we only knew how to play like 2 Rolling Stone songs, and we had to play them every set, like every night. So we played the same song like 3 times a night. And there's something about being in a band where, and it's funny because I just came from a rehearsal. I rarely play as much anymore, but there's this big gig called the Vancouver Sun Run, where for literally since I started playing in bands, our band sort of plays at the start line on this podium, on this sort of riser, like 20 feet in the air, as everybody runs by, and we're sort of singing all these, classic rock or pop tunes or things like that, while trying to substitute as many lyrics for Vancouver Sun Run as possible. I think that's the only reason they keep hiring us. They're like, "Should we get those guys?" I don't know, they're not that good. Yeah, but they did sing Wooly Bully, but sang Vancouver Sun Run on top of it, so that was cool.
They're willing.
But when you're in a band, like everything you're doing as you're playing is just has this connection, this dependency with everybody else. And there's a real sense, because it's one of those terrible, terrible jobs where, misery is almost certain and failure is guaranteed, where there is that feeling of it's us against the world. And so I think a lot of the friendships when I'm writing sort of trios, especially the Greatcoats, is very much written as if they're kind of a rock band. a rock band that is not well liked.
We like their music, though.
So
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
working out your issues, is what you're saying.
That's what all writing is. I remember I was on a panel once, and the question we were asked by the audience was, why is it that you write? And everybody gave I heard the great classics of, I write because I can't not write, and I write because writing is how we express ourselves and shape the world. And I was like, I write for the money and to get back at people in high school who are nice to me.
All still valid reasons, yeah.
I love it.
So if there's even one question in this interview that I don't like, you're going to show up somewhere. Not in a good way.
So I think we've kind of covered the other two questions we had about your writing, except I think there's only one more that about your writing as far as it goes. Is how far did you plan out the Duke story in the Greatcoats? Because he's my favorite character by a long shot.
Sure, Duke Gillard, yeah. So that was a really interesting one. So you mentioned before, working out one's issues and the sort of and the question before about friendships from real life and how they apply. So I have this really terrible quality as a human being, which is I form really strong intuitive snap judgments about people that almost always turn out to be totally wrong. And so I remember, for example, I had a coworker when I started teaching at Vancouver Film School, and I thought, this guy is a jerk. I don't like his attitude. He's one of these people, and we became like great friends. And so I'm a terrible judge of character. And so what's nice about that is I kind of allow that to be part of the storytelling process for the characters in my books. And so when I was writing that, when Falco first sees Duke Gillard, like, what is there to see other than this guy who's got all this power, who's doing all these obviously horrible things, who just represents everything Falco hates, which is an experience that we often have in life. We see people and go, and they happen to represent what we dislike. And then something happens that kind of forces us to be around them long enough to realize that that's just one facet of who they are, and that there's all these other things behind them, and which forces us to the terrible truths about human beings. You can be a powerful, nasty, self-interested ruler who absolutely adores his son and would do anything to get, to protect their child. And that's kind of where it all sort of formed. There was an interesting detail, which was, so Traitor's Blade came out, which was the first of the Greatcoats books. It was, the debut novel, and it was more successful, I think, than any of us sort of expected at the time. And I had signed and it was a 4-book deal, but all of a sudden, like, there's all of this kind of pressure, and writing your first sort of published novel is a bit like making your first album, I suspect. Like, every good idea you had was there, and you had your whole life to come up with them, and now you've got a year to come up with a bunch of better ideas. And I was really determined to make Night's Shadow richer and better than Traitor's Blade, because I knew it could never. Traitor's Blade would always have the advantage, right? It was always the first time you met Falco or Kester Brasti, right? The first time you saw the Greatcoats, the first time you imagined, those long leather coats with all the secret pockets with the tools and tricks and traps. And so I really, thought about it a lot. So I wrote this like 40-page outline, and most of the time I don't outline, but I did this time. And I remember I was just connecting a few things together, and all of a sudden Duke Gillard suddenly had this other dimension to who he was. And I remember Joe Fletcher telling me, you were, like, in an email, you are not allowed to redeem Gillard. And I was like, okay. And so I had to, so I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to redeem him, but I am going to make us see the tension, the troublesome conversation of two enemies talking about someone that they both know is innocent and needs to be protected. And then afterwards, it just sort of floated very naturally. Gillard he was never meant to be a character that showed up twice. He was only meant to be, one of the kind of bad guys in Traitor's Blade, but he just kept kind of cropping up where I'd go, Falk is about to get involved in something political, and he's terrible at politics, and I need someone to remind him how terrible he is at politics. And I'm like, who better than Duke Gillard? And yeah, I get I sometimes get letters from people saying, I won't spoil anything for anybody, but in Tyrant's Throne, sort of telling me that how that he's the point where they all cry.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
I'm like,
Yeah.
It's supposed to be like 3 chapters before when.
Oh, the
someone else
tears
is
kept
crying.
flowing though.
was
That's
gonna
why they
say,
were renewed.
I
Yeah.
probably cried 4 or 5 times during that book. But yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's very emotional. I definitely.
Well, I think you got to stock in
Chesky
tissue
never-
companies and something like that. Definitely.
Chesky doesn't cry
So-
easy either, by the way.
No, not during books. I don't cry easy. So, but it was worth the cry.
So,
Thank you.
we're going to move on a little bit. If you're willing, Sebastian, would you like to answer some weird questions from our audience with us?
I would be delighted and honored to obfuscate and deviate
Okay.
from those questions.
That's what
Yep.
that's why we have you here.
We
to
actually-
do that for us. So, because
Go
we're no
ahead.
good at it.
I'm going to try to twist every one of them into
Okay.
a plug for Malevolent
Okay.
7, no matter.
No, 'cause
Hard
we're
I
not
have
doing
to
shameless
stretch.
plugs yet. That's at the end.
No, that's a whole part of it. We'll do it more then too.
So this question
Yeah.
is actually from me. Where do you fall on the namings of weapons? Should you name your weapons?
Oh. I haven't tended to do it myself because anytime I've met a person in real life who named an object, I've always felt slightly less warm towards them. So, if I said, here's my iPad, Henry, you'd go, well, that's a little strange. Is it a magic iPad? Talking iPad. So yeah, I guess that's where I land on naming swords.
Do you name
I was
your
going to
That's-
car?
say,
that's
have
what I was
named
thinking.
2 vehicles in
Yeah.
my lifetime.
Oh no.
I
When
never
I-
have.
My first, so when I was really young, my first cars I named because, look, your first car, if your first car is a total piece of crap, you name it because you're praying that somehow there are like spirits that will, go, yes, we will. This car has a name, therefore we will inhabit it and protect that horrible carburetor.
Yeah.
Keep that thing going on.
That's the
fumes
magic
and
you're
gas
talking
and
about. We're
gas
trying to
fumes.
imbue it. Henry, the Honda Accord. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. If my iPad hadn't cost like $2,000, yeah, I'd give it a name because I'd want it. I needed to. But now I just have Apple Care, so I'm like, you
Yeah.
guys
The
fix it.
nameless iPad.
Oh, I named my first car because I loved it, to be honest. I am very pro naming of weapons in fantasy fiction. I love it. I think it's great. Excalibur, just as a point. What about you?
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah. I think if it so actually no, that's a good point and it's something I guess that hasn't been in play for me in the novels I've written, which is that if the weapon itself in a sense represents a character or its own character or represents a theme. So Excalibur isn't just here's a wicked magic sword. It's a representation, depending on which retelling. It often functions as a representation of all that is kind of good or righteous about
Right.
Arthur. And so in that sense, it makes sense that it's named. But Falkio mostly just makes really terrible rapiers and
What about
breaks
you,
them a
Sol?
lot.
A
Oh,
lot.
definitely. I like names. I don't like too many names. Like if they do like a couple, like 2 or 3 objects named and weapons in a book, that's fine. When they start naming everything and I lose track, then I don't like it.
What about you, Chesky?
I'm feeling like I have to be the same as Soul. I don't mind if it's a couple or a little more than a couple, but if every single sword has a name, then it's a little like, well, what's the point of naming it then if everything has a name?
Yeah, it's got to
just
be
another
special. Like
sword. If
magic.
there's something unique
yeah,
or special about it with its name, then like, or more than just its name, right? Then there's no point. So
So I'll ask the yeah, you're up.
That's me? Okay. You changed the colors again, so
No, I moved
okay.
them around because you had us all messed up, and
Okay, yeah.
I said no.
All right. So this is from our buddy Kiptan, and he said, "Is there a particular magic item trope that you enjoy?"
Magic item trope that I enjoy. Um, I don't know that there is. I think because they tend to get kind of burned out. That's always the problem with tropes. Like, it's funny because I always tell sort of newer writers, you know, don't go on, TV tropes, and don't go on any websites where people talk about tropes, because they'll make you feel like whatever you're writing is somehow wrong and you have to kind of twist it to or subvert it, when in fact, that doing that can kind of stop you from writing what you really want to read, and writing what you most want to read is your best shot at writing something other people want to read. There's a reason why we like magic wands, right? We like them because the instant we think about them, we kind of, we can imagine holding it. We have all of those reference points for it. So yeah, when I've tended to write, I haven't tended to write about a lot of sort of magic weapons or things like that. And it was funny in Spellslinger, in the third Spellslinger book, which is called Charmcaster. I wanted him to sort of learn a kind of an interesting, smaller sort of form of magic, and so I kind of brought coin magic into it with these different sort of coins, and I quite enjoyed playing with that. Coin magic is, I think, could be kind of fun. So I guess that'd be that one. I think if I saw that in someone else's book, I'd probably go, "That's
Yeah.
pretty cool too."
Mm. What about you, Red? What do you think?
It was good.
I like all the tropes around mirrors because we all have them in our houses. Mirrors as portals, mirrors as ways to spy on people. I just think that there's something that's, and we all played Bloody Mary when we were kids, right? Where you go in the bathroom and you say Bloody Mary 3 times into the mirror, and she's gonna. Maybe this is just
Yeah,
It's just-
I've never even heard of that. So
maybe it's a girls at a slumber party thing. Anyway, she's supposed to pop
Okay.
out of the mirror and haunt you forever or whatever.
you practiced your own mirror magic. Okay.
It didn't work. I was not disappointed, I guess. But anyway, so I just like all the tropes around mirrors because like I said, we all have them in our houses.
Hmm.
Have you read Mirror of Her Dreams by Stephen R. Donaldson? It's a duology. It's an interesting duology because it's incredibly frustrating to read in some ways. My wife has read it, I think, 2 or 3 times, that duology, and always kind of complains about it. Because the one of the two main characters is intentionally passive. She's extremely passive, and it's all very intentional to the story, but that makes it incredibly frustrating. But it involves a lot of mirror magic, and so it's done really quite well. And yeah, so if you like mirrors for magic trope, that's
I'll give
always
it a try.
interesting book or
All right.
duology.
And what about you, Chesky? What do you think?
Oh, this is a tough one. I can't think of like a specific magical item trope. I just love magic. So, I mean, anything with magic kind of qualifies for me.
See, I like shape shifting. So, like, if somebody has a sword and like it can turn into something else, that's cool. I mean, really, it's just a rule of cool. If they do something well and it fits the story and it's cool, I like it.
When you
Usually.
said shape shifting, I was thinking like werewolves or something.
Yeah, a sword that turns into a werewolf would be pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally what
I'd
I
love
meant.
to read about that. Yeah.
All right, I have the next question. What's one of your favorite opening paragraphs in a book that you've read?
Oh, I think it would be most recently, well, it was a couple of years ago, but it would be, oh God, Kate Quinn, The Alice Network, which is a kind of World War II spy sort of story about about these two women. Some of it's set during World War II and some of it's set just after. And the opening is just beautiful, like just the vividness of what it sort of she puts in your mind. Like, I really like an opening paragraph that can just immediately tell you the tone, and that's something I always kind of try to do when I'm writing. So when I'm reading a book that just does it as well as Kate Quinn's stuff does, I always really enjoy that.
Nice. Sounds great. I don't know if you guys know
I
your
do.
favorite paragraphs off the top of your head.
There
All right,
once
let's
was a
hear it.
boy named Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, right now I like the
by the way,
opening
for
of.
those of you who don't know,
Oh.
that's Voyage of the Dawn Treader, I believe.
Okay. And which I don't remember. It's fine. Okay. Recently, Malevolent Seven. I really like that one, but I guess I don't remember which Dresden book it was, but the one where he sets it on fire.
And it
was
wasn't his
great.
fault.
Yeah, and it wasn't his fault. That was great. Yeah, that was a fun one.
I don't have one. There's too many good books that I've read recently that have good openings, so I'm sorry. I'm gonna cop out on that one.
So, Lammy asks, what is your favorite Pratchett book?
My favorite Pratchett book. Oh wow, God, it's been so long. Oh well, I sort of know because this was when I actually had to write an article for the 20. I think it was the 25th anniversary of it or something. Good Omens that he wrote with Neil Gaiman. I like that book so much that I think I've partially rewritten it in my head. Like I think there's jokes that I don't think are in there that I just somehow that the book itself has conjured up in my head. In other words, yeah, I mean, he has that sort of unnatural ability to kind of create more story than there are words in the book, so that as you're remembering it, you're adding details, which is a pretty magical ability in a writer. So yeah, for me, it'd be Good Omens.
I have one for this one. I really love Going Postal and then Making Money. Those are the two of the highest ones for me. So
Hey. Yeah, I like the guards. Just that ragtag group is just a lot of fun. That's what I like.
I'm going to say The Wee Free Men, which is the first Tiffany Aching book. I really enjoyed that one. I mean, everything I've read of his I like. I think that's my favorite. But I'm not a completist. I haven't read everything.
all right,
You will one day.
Someday.
one day.
So many books.
All right, this question is from Sun Gamer 101, and he wants to know what's one of the best self-published or indie published things you've read.
Oh wow, that's a good question. I don't read a lot of self-published or indie published, but I just read Andy Palenkin's. I gotta remember the name of this because he lives in British Columbia. He's gonna punch me out. It's the Night. It's the first of the Night Queen, or someone quick look it up so I don't.
Yeah, he's gonna go to the Sunrun. Yeah.
Yeah. My head's full of the lyrics for like Green Day songs. What is it called?
It's not his Dark Blade
Okay.
series, right?
It's the Night. What is her name? Anyway, but I really enjoyed that. Child of the Night Guild. That's what it is. Child of the Night Guild, Queen of Thieves, Book 1. I read that recently, and I really enjoyed it. It was just he's just got a really good way of just like pulling you along into the story. So and it's always interesting because, like I say, every time I read a book, all I ever do is go, "Why did I wouldn't have done that. Why did he do that?" And so it's funny because I would go, wow, this is like he's stretching these scenes out. There's like way more of these scenes than I would have put. But somehow I just kept reading, and I tend to put down books quite easily. So yeah, that was a nice one.
Oh, all right. For this one, I'll steal your answer. I'm gonna go with Cradle by Will White. Big fan of that. I've read it with you for years, buddy. Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
I'm going to make Chesky really mad. Wool by Hugh Howey. See, I am not the only one.
I forgot.
I didn't know that was okay.
Yeah, he published it independently
All right.
first, yeah.
That was the first indie
And it
book
was
I ever
and
read.
one of the first I know about that got picked up by regular publishers after it had been published.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chesky hates that book.
And now a TV series on Apple
Apparently.
TV Plus
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
with Rebecca Ferguson, who's outstanding. So yeah. So Chesky, tell us why you hate Hugh Howey so much.
Well, let's see. He personally offended me by writing Bull. No, I started reading it. I really had a hard time connecting with it, and I just didn't like it. And maybe I'd like it on a reread if I went and tried again, but that time it wasn't right for me, so I said no.
All right. If you're not in the mood, sometimes if you're not in the mood, that's it.
Yeah. Well, I like as an indie author, she self-publishes her own books. It's her name's Rachel Aaron. She's published a couple series. The one I'm thinking of is The Legend of Eli Monpress, which is just he's a fantasy thief, but everything kind of has a spirit, and so you can't just take the treasure out of the chest because the chest will yell at you, or like alert people to it. But she plays it off in a way that he's able to trick the treasure into giving it to him to safeguard. It's just really nice and fun, and then it kind of it grows and becomes a different story. But I like her books a lot. I like them all. So
I have one from Huron Fan who said, if you had to lose one limb, which would you choose, an arm or a leg?
I would lose an arm.
Okay.
Yeah, no question. I really love cycling. You can walk, run, cycle with just one arm. You can still type with one hand. Pulling up your pants is harder, but it stays on the novelist.
Yeah.
Wearing pants.
Pulling up your pants is not the one I would have thought of.
Well, all right, so which one then?
I too would lose an arm. I'd rather be
An
able
arm?
to walk. You can still drive. You can still type. You can still cook. That might be a little harder. I feel like it'd be easier to adjust to. I guess I could, maybe.
yeah, arm for me as well. Left arm specifically. If I
Okay,
get the choice.
you don't, but okay.
No.
This
No,
isn't your question. This is
that's fine.
Kieran's question.
Well, it's Huron's question, but I think he would approve of my choices in this conversation. I would, I want to be able to walk. I guess that's my main thing. If I was still able to walk with one leg, then I would keep two arms. But I just want to at least be able to move around. It's the mobility. Yeah.
Yeah. The Robert Galbraith, J.K. Rowling books, those Cormorant Strike books. He's missing most of a leg, and he gets around pretty okay. And then, of course, the athletes who lost both legs and get those kind of steel.
Right,
Yes.
right,
Yeah. Ergonomics, very cool.
That can run insanely fast. But I think that's really hard.
It does seem difficult.
And yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm going with arms.
We're all team arm.
Team arm. That sounds super creepy. Okay. So Spook asks, have you ever read One Piece? Which is
I
Okay.
haven't.
it's a manga.
What is it?
Okay.
Manga.
It's the pirate one. You might have seen cartoons flying by on the TV and commercials once in a while. It's super popular for being very long. I think it's one of the longest standing mangas ever. If I want, it's at least 20 years it's been going.
It's forever long.
It's a
That's all
while.
that really matters about it.
I have seen exactly one episode of it
So-
and have never read it. Sorry, Spook.
Yeah, I don't.
No
I
worries.
feel like you just gave a super disappointing.
I think he might have been expecting it.
Spook's used to being
And he's-
disappointed in
Yeah.
us, so
Totally
it's all
trolling
good.
with that question. It was not.
Yeah, I'm surprised you put that one in here. I would.
I just figured I had to give him his little chance to troll. He's
That's
excited
okay.
we asked the question.
All right. Well, I have one question then. Cowboys versus pirates. Which would you want to be?
Oh, yeah. My instinct says pirate. I really hate scurvy. That's holding me back.
That's where my brain went
You know-
to, actually. Scary.
Cowboys live in such a troubled time, and also a lot of the sort of fighting they had to do is pretty awful because there's a lot of sort of expansion into indigenous territories. So a lot of the people that you're kind of shooting, whereas, I mean, technically pirates aren't really good people, but there's, you can often go after pretty nasty people,
Yeah.
privateers, so if I can be a privateer pirate, then I guess that's what I'd head for. And also, Raphael Sabatini wrote Captain Blood, so yeah, I'm gonna settle on pirates.
It's a good call. Chesky, what do you think?
I like it. Oh, see, I was kind of debating like cowboys are more city folk, and that's definitely what I am.
How are they
But
more city folk?
Cowboys have
You're
to
you're in the country, bud.
well, do pirates live in cities or do they live on boats for long periods
Wow.
of time,
Fair
Red?
enough.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
answered the question here. But I think I am going to have to go with pirates just because I feel like, while it's not safer, there's more people around me, right? So, cowboy, I'm kind of on my own. Pirate, I'm with
Okay.
a crew.
Red, what do you think?
I've never understood how anybody writes like a Western novel well, like in the sense of the fighting, because like a gunfight is generally, the sun's overhead, there's the shadows, you're in the middle of the empty town, sort of dirt road street, and then like you fire one bullet and you're kind of done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just don't know what to write. Like sword fights,
the,
you can do a lot of stuff.
that's the ideal one shot and you're done, right? So,
I am definitely going to say cowboy because I was a horse girl. And actually, I am related to like I have one member of the family that is a professional cowboy and one that owns a horse ranch. So I'm going to say cowboy.
All right, it's in your blood. Okay. No, I'm gonna go.
Did you know that
What's that?
Patricia?
No, it's okay.
Oh, go ahead, sir. Oh, I was going to ask
Yeah.
that Patricia Briggs, Patty Briggs, who's very legendary urban fantasy author, she owns a horse
Oh, cool.
ranch.
I'm pretty sure Mercedes Lackey
Yeah.
also
yeah,
owns
that's cool. I
horses,
didn't know that.
which, I mean, considering her
I haven't
Her
met
horse.
her.
books, that makes sense.
Yeah. It bleeds into the writing.
I keep getting told I don't write horses correctly by people who are really into horses, and then everyone who's not really into horses loves the horses in my book.
I like the horses in your book,
think
and
I
that
make
probably
my-
says a lot about
You
me.
would kill your horses. Your horses would be dead. Yeah, because they
I
go
would?
too fast for too long.
They're just too cool. That's why they died. They were too cool.
Yeah. Don't say nothing about Monster. Okay.
Yeah. So Monster's
Yeah, she's a
excusable because
magic
Monster's
horse.
a great
She's
horse.
like
Like, she's a magic horse. And Arsehole, sorry to
No,
use
it's okay.
That's
but
totally
it's the
fine.
British version, so it's okay for the
Yeah.
North American audience.
That's right.
He's never had to go too far or too fast. He just likes to prance around a lot and chase squirrels, which apparently horses don't
No.
all do. So I think horses. That's why I'm never going to be into horses. If they don't like squirrels, I'm done.
I'm gonna go pirate,
All right,
just because I'm a Florida
pirate.
man and I like the sea, and I'm okay with that and all its implications.
Sounds good. Okay. This is one of our last questions from our listeners from Jeff. He asks you Victor Lustwig or Charles Ponzi. So Victor Lustwig is the man who sold the Eiffel Tower twice while owning it exactly 0 times. And Charles Ponzi is the guy with the international stamps scheme. So if you had to pick one or the other, who are you going to pick?
I'm going with the guy who sold the Eiffel Tower twice. Yeah. Because I figure whoever he sold it to probably wasn't as badly hurt by all the people who suffered under Ponzi schemes.
That's fair. That's fair.
I'm going to go
Brad,
with
who are you
Ponzi.
going to go with?
And the reason why is because he actually kind of didn't really intend to become a con man, and it got really out of control. So he wasn't really trying to run a scheme. Plus, he does have an entire branch of con manery or whatever named after him. So, there's that. I had to look up Victor Lustig.
You had you just gonna get enough people under you in the Ponzi scheme so
I didn't
it's all
say.
okay for
I'm
you.
just saying.
Is that
No, that's
I had
interesting.
to
I
look up
didn't
the
know
other
that.
guy.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but he didn't mean to. He didn't mean to start a Ponzi scheme, but he did. And
So
now-
his life's like a comedy movie.
yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
he still should have gone to jail. I think he did, if I remember correctly.
Soulution, what
No,
about
I
you?
think anybody who can sell somebody an entire Eiffel Tower and they're willing to buy it and then he does it twice. That's cool. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to have to also choose Victor Lustwig because if I can become friends with him and he's not trying to sell me stuff, like I'd have to just be on my guard and be like, no. Anything he offers me is off the table. Like it's just not going to happen. But like if he could be my friend, that's a level of confidence boost right there to me. Like, yeah, I'm friends with the guy who can sell the Eiffel Tower twice to two different people. Like, you know, that would boost me up. So.
Okay then. So now it's time for shameless plugs. Sebastian, do you have something you want to plug?
I do. Malevolent 7 is coming out on May 11th in most of the world and May 16th in North America. And it's my latest fantasy novel. It's a dark, irreverent, fairly funny magical adventure story full of all these different types of mages, all of whom are broken in very different ways. And they are definitely not the good guys. But you know, sometimes even the bad guys have to be a little heroic in order for the world not to get destroyed. So it's my agent always likes to refer to it as Deadpool in Westeros. So I suppose it's a little bit like that. But yeah, it's lots of fun and it's coming out soon. And it's the first book I've ever had that has had so many pre-order special editions. There's like all these different special edition collector's editions of this book out. Broken Binding is doing unsigned and numbered with the sprayed edges and all stuff. And Goldsboro had one which sold out already. And Inkstone Books has one with beautiful black sprayed edges. And Coles in the UK is doing a special pre-order thing where I had to design all these Wondrist cards. So mages in this world are called Wondrists. Or that's one of mercenary mages are usually called Wondrists, and I volunteered to do these cards for each of the 12 different magic systems that are in the book, and so and so you can get those from Kohl's if you pre-order from them, or there might be some other opportunities here in North America. So so it seems to be doing well. I was kind of surprised.
It sounds really cool. I actually like that. I didn't know. I'll have to check out that pre-order.
Cesky, do you have something you want to plug?
I do. I'm going to just plug my podcast, the Libromancy podcast. I've covered all the Greatcoats along with a lot of other fantasy books, but it's just 15 to 20 minutes of me reading a book and talking about all the things that I liked about it, and sometimes the things I didn't like, but that's usually very small. So it's a lot of fun. And I will be doing Malevolent 7.
Cesky likes everything except wool and Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
Yeah, he's.
Soul, do you have anything you want to plug?
No. I'm here with the green team, and I will second Malevolent 7. I'm only a little bit into it. It's a fun read, go read that book.
And I would like to plug my podcast, Word Less, 2 words, which is on short science fiction and fantasy. And I believe the next book that we're going to be doing is Tales of the Greatcoats.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And by the way,
thank you.
And I hope you don't take it. I think you write way better short stories than you write novels. And I like your novels. I'm just saying, your short stories are par excellent.
Oh, thank you. I've actually been really shocked at how well that book did. It's the only thing I ever self-published, because I just thought, man, nobody's going to want a collection of short stories who read short stories anymore. Apparently it's easy to do, though.
There's a lot of people. That's a big thing. So yeah.
So I was really gratified. It just sort of seems to keep selling, which is great. So there will be a Tales of the Greatcoats Volume 2 sometime early next year.
And I'm hoping that these guys are going to come on to my podcast with Mark. So before we go by our real names. Okay, so thanks so much for joining us. You can find us on the Legendarium Discord, where we are also on Twitter at Green Team Pod. Join us in supporting the Legendarium via Patreon. Thank you, Craig, for loaning us a little corner of your media empire, and thank you, Horizon Brave, for starting it all. For Cesky, Soul, and Sebastian, good night. Okay, I'm going to stop now.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.